just revealed that Nvidia was the top searched ticker on CNBC.com in 2024, and for good reason. It was the third best performing stock in the S&P 500 this year, behind Palantir and Vistra, and became the second most valuable company by market cap behind Apple. The stock, though, has taken a breather since November, along with semiconductors at large, with shipments, though, of the highly anticipated Blackwell chip set to launch in 2025. Could Nvidia soar again in the new year? Well, joining me now is Bernstein senior analyst Stacy Rasgon. He has an outperform rating and $175 price target on the stock. Stacy, happy New Year. Happy New Year for Nvidia?
I hope so. I hope so. I'm not surprised it was the number one ticker that was searched. Like at this point, how could it be anything else? Like given the year that it's had. So
Tesla was close.
Well, okay, but still, look, we like Nvidia. We've liked Nvidia. It's had a great year. It had a great year the prior year too, right? So I mean, this is a couple in a row. We're looking to make it three. I think we're right in front of like what is potentially, I mean, we've had a number of like very massive product cycles on their part. We're right in front of the Blackwell cycle, which has the potential to be bigger than any of the ones that came before. The stock is still not expensive. If the numbers are anywhere close to being right, the stock's like low 30s price to forward earnings. I mean, yeah, I think you still kind of have to be there. I don't see how you can't own it in front of the product cycle. I mean, that tends to be the best time, and we're just at the beginning of that. So, yeah, I'm pretty positive for where this can go into next year.
The product itself is one thing, but there's also ecosystem. There's also software. Explain to investors what it means that Nvidia is open sourcing Run AI, this acquisition, $700 million acquisition.
Yeah, the ecosystem is just as important, if not even more important than the hardware. I mean, there are a number of players out there that have, plausibly decent hardware. You've got AMD, you've got a number of the startups, you've got the hyperscalers that are all doing their own chips. So it's not like Nvidia is the only game in town. But especially for the enterprise customers, it's not just about the hardware. You can have on paper a great chip, but if it's impossible to use it, that causes real problems. One of the advantages that Nvidia has because of this massive ecosystem, hardware, software, systems expertise, everything else that goes into this, it's just really, really easy to put this stuff in place, to adopt it, and to get it into work. I mean, again, I always say this about AMD. Like, again, I don't want to knock them. Like, they've done a decent job. Like, given where they were, their stuff was zero a year ago. They'll do several billion, $5-6 billion this year. But at the same time, it's like you can buy the AMD parts. It may take you months to get them up and running. Like, even if they were comparable on paper, which I still actually think they're behind on performance. But the NVIDIA stuff, not only is the performance better, given all the investment in ecosystem, and you can be up and running in days. Time is money in this market. And so it's not just enough to have the hardware. You need everything. And they have everything.
I started out in this business, not at the very beginning, but early on covering Apple. So everything's an Apple metaphor to me. Early on in the iPhone's life, people were saying, oh, well, Samsung's got the stuff and they make screens, and so it's just a rectangle, blah, blah, blah. But the App Store, the ecosystem, the services turned out to be a big deal, not only for the phones themselves, but also iOS versus Android. How much of a parallel is there in how NVIDIA's software and ecosystem makes those chips easier to use, easier to optimize versus the competition that might even have improving chips?
Yeah, it's funny. Ecosystems didn't find their way, to market with smartphones either. I mean, people talk about the Wintel ecosystem. You had Intel x86 and Windows on software, and that was an ecosystem that locked in profits and held for decades too. So this is not a new thing in tech. I think there's a number of historical parallels that you could draw. I'd say one, maybe just spitballing, one difference maybe between where we are in AI and where we are in smartphones is you did eventually get like a second ecosystem that grew up. And Android, like from a volume standpoint, I guess is sizable relative to Apple, but all the profits are still flowing to Apple given the amount of lock-in that they have. And I'd say on the AI side, you don't even have that kind of like dual option right now. You've still got Nvidia way up here, and then kind of everybody else way down. Even everybody else that's trying, they're still very, very early on. You have to remember, Nvidia's been investing in this ecosystem literally for decades.
Yeah.
Everybody else that is trying to do this is sort of coming up. And maybe that's another difference between this and smartphones.
For sure.
You have the Apple ecosystem and the Android that sort of came like on its coattails. Nvidia's got literally a 10+ year head start on everybody else in this space. It's a tough barrier to break.